Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is the Oracle Autonomous Database Learning Lounge. I am Marco Sanasivia, part of the product management team for Autonomous Database. And today we're going to have a very, very interesting session. We're going to be talking all about security. So Michelle Malcher joins us, and she's going to be basically talking to you guys about how Autonomous Database provide already a high level of security, right? Including all the encryption and compliance access control, things like that. But also, how security patches that we apply to the Autonomous Database for you actually enhance and reduces all the risk, right, for any vulnerability. But especially, she's going to be touching on the what is new with the Oracle Database 23 AI in Autonomous Database, and she's going to be actually focusing on SQL Firewall. All right. So throughout the session, we're going to have product managers that are going to be listening into your questions. If you have a question, make sure to type it in the Q&A section there in Zoom, all right? And we're going to distribute some links to you guys via chat, all right? The recording of this session, links, the slides, all are going to be available on that link that you see there that I'm going to give you guys right now as well. So speaking of links, here are some of the links that there. Everything, how to get to Autonomous Database, how to come back to the recordings and slides, and how to join us, right? So on social or ask your questions. So for the developer Slack, right, we have a special invitation link for the Oracle developers. So if you join our Slack workspace, you can ask your question there as well, okay? So thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us and doing the session. I think it's going to be, a lot of people learning a lot about the SQL Firewall. So if you want to, please, start sharing yourself and take it away. And thank you very much for joining again.
Sounds great. Well, I am excited to dive into the SQL Firewall. And with today's session, we're going to do something maybe just a little bit different. We're talking about how you have that access to the database, and we're going to look from the hacker perspective. Everyone put on their black hats. We're going to look at, how do the hackers actually go and attack the database? And so when we're looking at that, we know we have our data, multiple databases, different environments where we store that. We have to let the users in, right? They need access to the data. So we need to let them in to be able to use that. And there's different applications that get created with it. And because there's different applications, our developers need their development environments and test environments to use it. And then we have all kinds of private data, sensitive data, different types of data that we store in different places, including our backups and things that we have to manage. And normally we have our infrastructure, system admins, database administrators. They kind of have access everywhere and have to manage this different area. So where are we going to attack first, right? As that hacker, I want to go and get the most highly privileged users and see if I can get some credentials from those administrators. So that is one area that if I have access to all this different data and can access it from different places, that's one place that I'm going to go after those highly privileged users, right? Well, and then maybe I can actually go after the other users that are using the applications. That's another good place to grab credentials, get access to those accounts, and use that to get information and data from the database. We might even have different areas of our application, which is going to be important what we're talking about with the SQL Firewall, of how we access the data from those applications and use that. And we'd like to think that everything's secure and packaged around the database, but there are ways to get past that, right? There are either through the applications, if I'm looking at it, if there's some sort of insider type of attack. Not everyone is wearing their white hats all the time, so there might be that network type of way of getting into it. And how can I bypass the database to get to data and information and those files or backups? So I'm looking at all these different ways of trying to get that information from the database. And well, you know what? If someone hasn't patched the database, I actually, as a hacker, have a toolkit that I can use to go and exploit those vulnerabilities. So now patching is a big priority, right? To make sure that they can't access and exploit those vulnerabilities against the database. And then, of course, if I've copied data in different places, I need to make sure that that is also secure. So, as a hacker, right, we have all these different levels that we can attack at, where we can go after the data, trying first, those highly privileged users, credentials, and then really looking at different exploits that we have. So we've mentioned a lot of these different common reasons for those breaches, right? We have if we have unencrypted data, we don't have the patches applied. Those toolkits are out there for the hackers to use, and any of our security configuration drift or our privileged users can access different areas or different data. If we're not auditing or know what they're actually doing, we're missing out on key information to show us when things aren't normal on how that access is happening. And of course, we have that sensitive data that we need to be extra careful with. The good news about this is a lot of these reasons are addressed by Autonomous Database. We can leverage this in a way that we provide encrypted data both at rest and in transit, and our backups are encrypted. We apply the security patches. Marcus already mentioned this, right? It's an automated patching of your database. So it actually rolls through and provides it being available during the patch, and you actually don't have to worry about the being up to date on your security patches. Those are handled automatically. The other side, knowing your data, knowing your users are really handled by those that are using the database. On our side, we don't know your data, we don't know your users, but that's the customer responsibility. The good news there is Autonomous Database has built-in security and tools that will help you in that area. So you'll start to see that we have these areas where when we need to protect the database, we need to implement that secure configuration. Autonomous Database does that by default. We have best security practices, different regulations that we check against, but we make sure that we have ways of reviewing the configuration, getting it set up, and providing a out-of-the-box secure environment that includes encrypting the data at rest and in transit, protecting those keys, and not necessarily relying on storage to encrypt your data. So that allows us to be able to provide that security for encryption at rest, in transit, and through our backups. And then, of course, we have to have that control access of who's actually going out there and grabbing information and privileges. And there's some really nice tools that I'm going to show you in a minute about how we actually manage those users. How do we know when things change? And Autonomous has these tools that you can use to do that, which is the next step, right? Being able to monitor that. All right, so if we're doing that, we're looking at what is always on security and what is Autonomous actually helping us with, right? We're secure by default. We have those always up-to-date security patches that protect us against those exploits and those vulnerabilities. We have the end-to-end encryption. infrastructure level network isolation, but we're also going to look at that firewall at the database level to help us secure that data that's sitting in the database. And of course, we have different user controls that are part of this and ways to access that and audit the information of how those users either change or change their privileges. I know this is redundant. I get this, but remember that huge list of things we talked about for the hackers actually coming in and looking at this. There are things that we do by default and are managed by Oracle to handle this for you with autonomous, right? Your OS, your platform security, your database patches. I don't know how much time it's taking you to apply regular security patches to your databases, but not having to worry about that will allow you to spend time on the other areas of those privileges, sensitive data discovery, and even some of that activity auditing that you need to look at. So, and even handling the encryption by default and having that on by default is helping you not to have to worry about managing those areas of the database. So putting this out there one more time just to show some of the different things that we already do from autonomous, having it on, and then we're going to talk about how we help you manage the rest, because that's the area that we need to look at. We need to look at privileges, how they're accessing the database, what happens when these things change, and our valuable asset of our data is what we're really looking to secure. The users obviously need to get in, use the data. Our businesses rely on that information. So our applications, our users, we want them to have access to that, but the right data that they're supposed to use. So we need to be able to assess who's accessing what, protecting those highly privileged users, because that's what the hackers are going after. They want to get those credentials for those highly privileged users. So we need to make sure that we are able to detect that. We're able to see when different policies are violated. And then, of course, we want to prevent it from even happening. So we're going to take a look at that. And when we have all these different pieces that we have to look at, right, we are looking at how are we best going to be able to secure the Oracle database? Well, autonomous allows us to do this easily. We have a data safe security assessment tool that I'm going to show you. We use that it's available with the autonomous database. We use that to manage the SQL Firewall. With that, we have privilege analysis, users assessment. We can mask our data that we have for our test environments and our QA environments. We already talked about that we encrypt the data at rest and in transit, and that allows us to use those, not worry about when data is being accessed or anything on the back end files that we have. And then, of course, we have a lot of different strong authentication, centrally managed users that you can then have them based on the roles and responsibility, get the right privileges in the database. Couple things that I want to mention with the access controls is the fact that when we are looking at those highly privileged users, also part of autonomous, we have database vault that can be enabled and used for those highly privileged users to basically separate out into realms your data. And that's going to restrict if those credentials are compromised or restrict that access to sensitive data and still allow your database administrators to do their jobs and work with the databases in the ways that they need to work with it. And there's, of course, other ways to manage access. So you have some flexibility, but let's take a look on how we make it easy with some of the auditing and data safe tools that we have. So with SQL Firewall, right, we want to make sure that we can use something that is going to not allow users or hackers to get around these controls. I had Marcus ask the question about this is different than uh, the Audit Vault and Database Firewall. That's a separate appliance, and there's definitely reasons to have that autonomous. What we have built into the database with 23AI is SQL Firewall, and it's part of the database. So we can enable that and set up policies to be able to monitor or block any of the violations that come through. And this is going to help us mitigate those risks for SQL injection attacks, attacks coming from different places that are not our application servers, and reduce on the credential theft and abuse. We can actually restrict database access to only authorized SQL statements. If you think about it, the database is already capturing what SQL statements are running. We're creating query plans. We know that things are performing. We have all the SQL that is running against the database. We can leverage that to capture what is there and monitor so we know what SQL should be allowed, what our applications are running. If someone's trying to download like all the data, select star from one of the major tables and pull all that data, we can alert on that, or we can even block that. So that helps us there too. That approves SQL. So if we're going through the, for example, an HR application, right? We'll have some SQL that is valid that they can select, allow those different places that they're coming from, current user based on the user. Is it an application user? Is it a user that's connecting to the database specifically? So if a HR admin selects from the employee table, right, they're allowed to do that. That's part of their job. It makes sense that they can grab that information. But if they do something else from a different client that's not necessarily their application or what is not expected, you can actually block that based on the connection. And you can see here, this is actually adding that or 1 equals 1 to pull back all the data to get around that where clause or that virtual private database that has the information sort of designated by ID or department. So that then automatically blocks that SQL from happening. Again, we can either monitor for that SQL injection or we can block that as we're going through. So we talked about some of the SQL that we're gathering. We can prevent different SQL from actually being run against the database. We have a entrusted database connection path, right? We see it from different clients they're coming through different applications, and we can mitigate that risk even with IP addresses or who's allowed to connect directly to the database. So if they're connecting through the HR application, that will allow them to do the queries and run and get their answers back. But if they go in through a tool that just accesses the tables directly without maybe some application security around it, that's going to block them and give them those errors that will come back that it's not allowed, that connection's not allowed. All right, so we have very easy configuration. I'm going to show you exactly how we can configure that. We're going to review some of the collections that we've done, and we're going to enforce so we can either block or monitor that. So here we go, live demo. Everyone ready? Marcus, do we have any questions we want to deal with before we go into live demo?
We're good. Someone was asking whether it was SQL Firewall was already included in the license, even if they had like a bring your own license. And others, there's a new question here. Can DBAs exempt themselves from SQL Firewall?
Yes. So we're going to actually go through that. And autonomous databases, it includes SQL Firewall. It is not an extra option.
Not an option, right?
On autonomous database. So first thing I want to do, I have a couple databases in different states because I want to make sure we show you, we have a couple good DBAs and a couple evil DBAs. So we want to protect against that. So we can show you how you can exempt different groups and different users. But I created a database, right? Let's start it off. Created a database this morning. You can see it's created. This morning it was created. And here are the options that I use for this. Down here is actually data safe, right? So I need to register a database. It's going to register to my data safe environment so I can actually look at all of my databases that I have registered with data safe. So this is going to take just a couple minutes to register with data safe. So that was the new database I just created. You'll see I already have the two other databases registered uh, with data safe. So I have my movie stream database, and if you've done any of the live labs, we use movie stream information and get different details about it. Allows us to work through some of the live labs that we have. So this overview, actually, if you want, there's a self-paced workshop that walks you through data safe and the different features that are part of that. So that takes you to a live lab to actually work through some of these and see how this configuration gets set up and used. So we have here our dashboard of our different databases. This is an overall picture of my databases that I have registered with DataSafe. So the DataSafe tool is included with Autonomous Database. You can use it if you have cloud databases. You can actually even connect to your on-prem databases and manage your security settings with DataSafe in the cloud. So we have different assessments that are there. We have user data discovery, data masking, activity auditing, all of those things that we talked about in the beginning of where those hackers are trying to get into different places, right? If they're going after the users, if they're using any of those exploits that are available. And I can, even that sensitive data, I have a place where I can go and manage that. So if I'm looking at the different securities, I have some password authentication, user accounts. That's great. I don't have any external authentication set up, but this would be like if you're using Azure accounts or OCI, IAM accounts, Active Directory accounts. Those would be your external authentication, which you can definitely use for your centrally managed users. So you'll even see the different types of users, the database users and these externally managed users as part of that. 23AI also has unified auditing, right? That's our auditing choice. In Autonomous, we have mandatory auditing policies that are on by default. You can add additional policies that you would need for either users or for data that you know you have. So you can have that. And then this user assessment, I'm going to pull this up because one of those things with users, right? We need them changing their passwords and making sure they're doing things that they correctly with their user credentials. Or if you know that a DBA is on vacation and all of a sudden they're logging in, well, all right, well, DBAs might work 24/7, but you need to make sure that there's not any abnormal activity happening. So what I have here, if I go to my target, I will see actually with my report, oops, let me go to my report. And you will see that there's different users that are logged in with different permissions and when the last time they logged in. So I can grab that information and take a look there. All right. So as you saw, my database was already registered. So now I actually have 3 databases that are out there that I can leverage and use. But let's go into SQL Firewall and take a look here. We'll see that
And
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, real quick, there's a quick question here. Whether DataSafe is available for always free databases, autonomous databases.
It is available.
Perfect. Yes.
I have used it with always free. All right. Great. So you can see that my new database that I created this morning, it's registered with DataSafe. SQL Firewall is not enabled, and same with my movie stream. Really, to go and enable SQL Firewall, I just click on enable, and it will go through those steps to set up what it needs to actually administer policies and have the information for the monitoring for the SQL firewall and the violation alerts that it needs to have. So it's going to set up that connection, which does not take very long. And then I can start a collection of my data and policies. So, like I said, the things that are running against your database, your application is running. This is not blocking anything right away. It's setting up what we need for policies. And you wanted to talk about for users, right? I can actually select my database users. So I'm going to select my movie stream. It's my application. I want to collect the application code that is running against the database. And I want to grab that information so I can start a collection. And then, of course, that the application has to be running, gathering the SQL statements that are there. I can also go and I'm going to quickly go and run some SQL against movie stream. I'm going to actually log in as the movie stream user and go and grab. So you can see that collection that is running. If I go in here and I have my different data, I can do a select star from customer and grab that. And as I'm running this information, depending on what the application is doing, it's capturing all this information, right? I can get select star from customer feedback. And so it's going to grab that information as well. So if I go in here and I actually stop that collection, you will see that it created a SQL collection, pulled in the information that I have, and I can use that to generate a firewall policy. So not only does it have information about the connection that application was running, you'll see here it has the IP address, what app it was using, the different information about the client that is running that you can leverage to create those policies. And it is also updating the SQL that was gathered from that. So it's a real easy way to get started. And here at this point, we're not blocking anything yet, but we can actually manage that. So I have no policies enabled, but I've captured some SQL statements that I have here. And so from that list, I can basically say, all right, no, you know what, for movie stream, I don't want anyone selecting everything from a table because they can actually pull that information down and use that. So I can go and I can grab those different SQL statements that were part of that. Basically looking, you can select different details. So as I started the DB actions, I can see what was actually run. I can add to the filter if I don't want different statements run against it, and I can allow that. And you can even see the different IP addresses and where that connection is coming from to enable the queries. So basically what I can do here is actually just not allow certain SQL statements to run. And so I'm going to show you that in a different policy that I've already created. But this is how you get started with that. So I can basically generate that report. I can add from violations, and I can deploy and enforce this policy that says I want all the session context, where they're connecting from, information about the user. I can do only SQL statements if I want to protect against that SQL injection. And then I have the choice to observe, which will give me the violations, give me the information that where we're getting those violations, or I can just block them. And then I have auditing on or off for these violations, right? If I'm maybe just plain observing, maybe I want that auditing, or if I'm blocking, I want to grab that auditing so I have those records and that detail, and then I would just deploy and enforce that. So that goes off and creates that policy that I'm actually going to use. Now, I've already created another policy out here with my other database. As you can see, there's different violations, right? It's been collecting information, and there's certain SQL Firewall policies that it was collecting on, grabbing information about it. All my target databases are in one place, so I don't have to do it for each individual database. And so I have all of that information basically set up for here. So we're asking about the good DBAs, right? So DBA Marty is one of our good DBAs, right? So I'm not going to actually, I just have observe and grab that information. I've done the same thing with grabbing SQL statements. You can see what this policy is actually doing. It's enabled. It's for that SQL commands only. And I'm going to enforce that for my session information and my SQL statements, and only observe and grab that information. So if I actually, I'm going to go to my query window, and I'm going to log in as Marty, customers, and let's go and run that. So I'm going to run that as Marty, and we're going to see that that's going to return results, right? I have that policy set up, though, that anything that has a select star in it, I want to capture that information, right? My DBAs shouldn't be normally grabbing all that detail, but there might be a specific reason why he's doing that. So if we go back and look at our SQL Firewall, we'll start to see that there's new violations that come up. And there was one observed violation that came up. So DBA Marty, right now, we generated the firewall policies. We got the information on that. And then we'll see here that we have, there's observed issues with that firewall policy. So we've hit the select star queries, again, looking at that information of what's actually running against there. So that will allow us to decide if we want to deploy a block or actually do that. Now, let's say, we got evil DBA who comes in and wants to run the same type of SQL statement. So they come in, they've stolen maybe Marty's credentials, and we want to run the same type of query against the database. So let me just open another window and run that. Now I've got a SQL Firewall violation, because what I've done is I've actually said Marty's fine to run outside of the application, but any other DBA or any other user can't connect through that IP address and actually connect the database. So those are where you're actually blocking the SQL from actually hitting the database and going through. So now if I go back to my window and I can look at my policies that we've increased in our block violations. So we've got another violation that's been blocked, and that one is pulling back what has happened against the same schema, same query that we just ran. And here it is. It's that was blocked because I wasn't allowed to go in and run that query from where I was. So my violations reports will show me all the violations for all the different databases where I have the SQL firewall enabled, and start collecting that information and give me either whether it's blocked, whether I'm monitoring for it. I can create custom reports based on this. I can add SQL back in that's allowed based on these reports as well. So if I go to DBA Marty and I look at what he has run for SQL, I can say that, okay, those are allowed, but if they're actually blocked or if it's a violation, I can add that right back in to the whitelist for my SQL statements and manage in an easy way to be able to see what's going on in the database and grab that, what the SQL's running, where I have violations or where I have it blocked, and grabbing the details about that. So that was a lot of information about SQL Firewall. I'm pausing, I'm breathing.
Yes, there's a yeah. So there are lots of questions. So I'm just picking up on two which are very similar. People asking about whether you're going to have a network overhead for SQL Firewall. Another one asking if there's a performance impact due to data save, SQL Firewall performing this data collection, right?
Right. So SQL Firewall is part of the database engine itself, right? It's built into the database. Enabling it allows us to grab the information that we're already grabbing for the database for the SQL that's running. Minimal overhead based on that. You've seen, I'm going back and forth. I know I'm not running big, huge queries against this, but it's pretty much right away that it's returning because we're already collecting SQL. So you do that collection, collect the SQL. When you go to run the SQL, you're already running against it to know that it's a SQL plan. And so it's checking on the SQL firewall violations and running against there too. So that's very minimal. The data safe, it does a regular collection of your security assessment, your drift, your users. It's not something that is constantly running. It's really scheduled to run. You can set the windows that you're running against it, but it's looking at some of the data dictionary information about when that user last logged in, looking at your audit information for you, and pulling that details back in. So these are things that are already regular happening against the database. What we're doing is putting it in a place that's easy to manage, easy to look at, and easy to grab when things are violations or abnormal activity that's running against the database.
All right.
I think that answered that question.
Yes. No, that's great. Can I tackle a few others before we continue?
Yeah, let's tackle a few
real quick ones here. So one person was actually asking about when you were showing the select star from customer, asking whether it also reports the error statement select star from customer. So whether the error statement is also stored in the data safe, I guess, right? When you were getting the information.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it picks up on that error message because nothing was returned to it and it wasn't matching. Well, it's not SQL that matches what's allowed. So it will probably show up as an audited violation, but it's not going to block that because it's a incorrect information. Like if I go back here, I can actually run a select star from all tables, right? Because that's allowed. And I can get information that I need basically for my job to be able to grab details about that. And that should be one of the statements that's allowed to be run. Well, maybe not. Oh, you know what? Because it's the IP address. So it's not even getting past that to go and get the SQL statement that's there.
All right, excellent. And someone else also asked whether you can customize what the end user sees as a message coming from the SQL firewall, from the policy block, for example, right? Because you
Yeah,
had one before when you were doing the customers that it would had a little
right.
more
It has the
information about.
SQL Firewall violation. So that's going to come back as a SQL Firewall violation as the error message where you can get more details about it. The
Okay.
blocked one, the one that's monitored does not give you an error message. So that one just will grab the information that there was a violation and monitor that.
All right. And well, a last one before we continue. Is there any other admin interface for SQL Firewall other than DataSafe?
So for autonomous database, it is data safe to be able to manage that. There's obviously APIs and ways to turn that on uh, through the APIs and queries. So you can use that, but the interface is through data safe.
All right. Great.
So great questions. And hopefully this shows you easy ways to create policies. We created the movie stream SQL only statements. We have an evil DBA, myself, that was being blocked by IP address and being able to access it. And we have Marty, the good DBA, that is out there running, just being able to observe to make sure that there's nothing abnormal about what's going on. So if there was different things that they were all of a sudden accessing, was that a credential or an issue there that you have? The other thing that you can do is even from you can block. So you saw that we were able to go out there and run things from basically my visuals VS Code and my SQL developer, but I can actually block access to database actions using SQL Firewall. So if I'm here, I can do my customers again as admin. That shouldn't be blocked. That should return back information for me. But if I log out, and even as DBA Marty, because his session is also being connected, I would be able to see that that will pick up a violation, but it won't block it because I only have it to pull back information if he violates any of the set policies that are there, right? So that should pull back information, but then I should see that come up as a violation in my reports. So if I go to context violations, we'll see right now, I just had Marty come in through that, and that's allowed action. But because that came in through a different IP address through my database actions, as opposed to other places where he's able to connect, that's going to at least allow me to monitor for that. So there's a lot of different details that you can monitor, block, audit, to really understand how that environment changes and how we're using it. The other thing I just wanted to touch on briefly here with the security assessments. So if we go back to DataSafe itself, of why this is a really nice tool to be able to use on your autonomous databases and other databases as well. You have that user assessment we talked about. We talked about a data discovery, so you can find information, whether there's sensitive data out there. Again, going against the different, I grabbed that against Movie Stream. I can add another target to pull that in and see the common and sensitive data types. There's over 180 different sensitive data types that it's looking for. You can add additional ones, but you're able to monitor and pull back as data gets loaded, or as you want to do an assessment against that database for that. You can then mask your test and dev environments. You have your activity auditing here. And then with your security assessments, let's go to, I want to go to our one target that we just added. So we're going to our security assessment. Remember, I said I created a database this morning. Let's review what actually comes up. By default, right, we have complex passwords, we have network encryption, we have patching that happens against the database, we have our transparent data encryption already implemented. And this is before I even go out there and start using the database. And then I have my auditing, that the mandatory auditing pieces that are there to give me details about that. I have different checks for this assessment. It also changes. I can put a baseline in place. I can accept certain risks. I can worry about when things drift and when my security actually changes. So I can go against some of the same security policies, STIG benchmarks, CIS benchmarks, the GDPR for private data privacy, and even some of our best practices. So I can actually go out and take a look with our, by default, right? We have a couple of the user accounts that are low risk because they have different permissions when we install them. And then there's other areas that I can evaluate to make sure that they're not bumping up against any policies that I have in my database or in my company. So it's a really nice tool to be able to use and leverage that. All right, back to just a couple more slides I wanted to do. And if there's any questions, Marcus, please chime in. So we really, in wrapping up here, we talked about leveraging Oracle Data Safe with Autonomous. Autonomous database has a lot of security already built in. Things that Oracle is managing, allowing you to focus on some of these security assessment, user assessment, the different activity data that you want to protect in your database. And so the in-database SQL Firewall is a 23 AI feature. So if you're using 19C autonomous, you're not going to see that. But with the 23 AI, you will have access to the SQL Firewall. A couple other enhancements in case you haven't heard about them in 23 AI. You have read-only users that you can set to read-only, new roles to allow you to do and develop and use the about 24 different privileges set specifically for developers in the database, and schema privileges. So I can grant at a schema level and manage that at a schema level. So when new objects get created in my schema, the users automatically have permission to those objects. We talked about having drift and being able to look at our security assessment. There is where we match up to different regulatory compliances, and by default, when it's configured and installed, those security practices are already in place. So you can manage against drift of those controls. There's a new EU DORA regulation out there that also is you can use autonomous to assist in those types of regulations. And when you really look at the end-to-end security that's part of autonomous and the tools that are available for you to use at no extra cost, especially the patching, right? The regular patching of that, the managing of the users, and then because this is autonomous available in the different clouds, it's the same security that you're using on the autonomous databases in different cloud vendors as well. So I have a few things. I'll put some links because I have a couple of the security guide that is out there, information about the blog on Dora. And then, of course, you can try autonomous database with the live labs that are part of that to be able to get hands-on with data safe, SQL Firewall, 23 AI, autonomous, and enjoy that.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you very much, Michelle. Really appreciate it. All right, guys. So Q&A is open. Michelle, we've had a lot of questions. We still have them. I'll probably try to ask you the first one that comes to mind, the one at the bottom there. We have one. Can the firewall policy violations get stored as part of the database audit and maybe sent to Audit Vault?
Yes, so there is part of that is actually in Autonomous has the audit tables and auditing reports that you can have, and you can send those audit logs off to different tools that you might need to use, and including Audit Vault.
All right, excellent. So if you don't mind reading from the top, I guess, and then we can check the ones that we can answer, guys. Because we have many questions, we might not answer everything. So I'll make sure to get back to you guys if we can't. All right.
Okay. So I'll answer. SQL Firewall is part of Oracle Database 23 AI, right? So it is a 23 AI feature for Oracle Database. It is included in Autonomous. You can use it, you can enable it, you can use it as a part of Autonomous. It's included. And you can manage it through DataSafe. So that probably answers that question on a couple of those of where you can actually use SQL Firewall. And then it is different than the Audit Vault database firewall. The Audit database firewall is a separate appliance outside of the database. SQL Firewall is built into the database, and you set up the policies in the database for them to be managed. There's generate sets of SQL statements, right? You can add those towards the rules. You can capture the different rules that are there and use those as part of your whitelist that you're monitoring. So if you have different tools that generate SQL statements, you can use that, capture the SQL statements that are run. If you hit a violation as you're sort of monitoring it, you can actually accept that SQL statement to be part of your whitelist as part of the SQL Firewall. Wow, there's a lot of good questions. A lot of good questions. Let's see. Fine tool monitoring when dealing with Apex. Apex is running SQL against the database. So I would just capture that workload, monitor it, and being able to use that, you'll be able to see what statements are there. And so that will help as well. And then how do we help automate the process in the DataSafe, right? There's different APIs. You don't want to sit there all the time in having to register databases or do that. So there's different tools that you can use to handle multiple databases. The nice thing about DataSafe, though, it does give you an overall picture of your autonomous databases that you have in the tenancy in that region, and you can take a look at your overall status of that. And yes, I totally agree. We don't want to do it manually, right? It's called autonomous for a reason, but this is to be able to help you get started with that and see what we're doing on the back end to be able to look at the SQL Firewall and DataSafe. But the dashboard does provide you that nice overall view. There's notifications that you can get that will help automate some of that if there's violations and those areas. DBAs can exempt themselves from the SQL Firewall because you can set it up that that user is not part of that policy. You saw that admin wasn't part of that policy. They were able to do things. You can select different users as part of that policies. You can set everyone up besides your DBAs for that exemption. And it does not require Database Vault for that. Database Vault is looking at your realms of your data and actually allowing those users to have access to those realms in Database Vault, and also managing your users on creation and passwords and how you're adding permissions to there.
Right, and also that Database Vault is also included in Autonomous Database, right?
Correct. And it is also included. Gen AI tools helping the users get block statements. There's different things. I've run Select AI against SQL Firewall that provides us different ways of working with Gen AI. There's different tools that are part of the roadmap for some of the security that is being built into the database. So that is one thing to come. And DB Advisor tools, those recommendations, those benchmarks of the security to be safe against evil DBAs, right? So yes, there's those benchmarks and you can look at, and when they start to get into the high or critical area, that's an area that you really want to be able to prevent and do that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we cleaned up. Excellent. All right, guys. So again, questions are still welcome. So, if you guys want to ask any questions, please keep asking them. I'm going to, again, share the links in chat with everyone on the Autonomous Database, okay? And then because we are getting close to the top of the hour, or actually already over a little bit.
A little over.
So final thoughts. If you want to come back to this site, right, where you're going to actually see all the recordings, all the links. Upcoming sessions are going to be posted there as well. So again, thank you for the feedback today on the polls. Thank you for the feedback for Michelle's session. I think people learned a lot, and it was great. Michelle, great session. Thank you again. And I think that's it. So I'll leave the Q&A open still for a couple of minutes if you guys want to ask any additional questions. In the meantime, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the excellent presentation, and thank you everyone for joining. And that's it. I really appreciate it. I'll leave this open for a little more, and then you guys can still, you guys still have time to ask questions if you want. All right.